The already unpopular Irish government is in crisis tonight in the wake of its capitulation to negotiate billions of euros of international bailout money. Facing calls to step down, the Taoiseach, Brian Cowan, is due to make a statement any minute now. Public anger has spilled over into the streets amid questions over whether the government has sufficient authority to deliver a 4-year plan of cuts due to be published this week. From Dublin, our economics editor Faisal Islam has this report.
Economic collapse and now seeming political collapse too. Ireland, a nation looking for someone to blame for natural justice tonight, and not just the protesters from Sinn Féin who broke through police lines into the courtyard of the government's buildings. Across Dublin at the GPO, the historical beating heart of Irish self-determination, locals were beginning to sense that their fate was no longer entirely in this nation's hands, but also in that of the EU, the International Monetary Fund and the European Central Bank.
As we've lost our sovereignty, the government are now powerless and we'll be led by Europe.
And what do you want? Do you want the government to change then?
It's disgraceful that it came in the first place. It should never have happened. I mean, it's treason practically, you know.
A disaster.
A disaster? Why?
Just sick of it. Just sick of it.
You're sick of it?
We're back to where we were maybe 100 years ago. We're still in debt to Britain and the rest of Europe. So
how does that feel?
I don't mind. I don't mind really. I don't mind. It's all maybe all for the better in the end. Maybe we should have stayed in the Commonwealth. I don't know. Nobody knows, do we? Do we? I don't know. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye.
Are you happy about like the IMF and Europeans coming in and saying where things have to be cut and which taxes have to go up?
Well, I think they might have more sense than the Irish government. They might be able to actually do something, hopefully clear some of the mess up, because the government seems to be messing around and actually not doing anything. So hopefully they might clear it up.
People feel misled and betrayed. Not the words of a political enemy of the Taoiseach and the Finance Minister, but the words of a coalition ally and fellow Cabinet Minister, the Green Party leader John Gormley, who was in the room yesterday when the Cabinet agreed to ask for a bailout from the IMF and the EU. And now a day of economic trauma has turned into one of high political drama. The Green Party leader saying he will stay the course until these negotiations are completed, but an election will come in January.
Leaving the country without a government while these matters are unresolved would be very damaging and would breach our duty of care. But we have now reached a point where the Irish people need political certainty to take them beyond the coming 2 months. So we believe it is time to fix a date for a general election in the second half of January 2011.
Taoiseach Brian Cowan was only given a few minutes' notice of this unexpected bombshell that reflects a growing backlash against him in Ireland for his role during Ireland's credit bubble and the secretive bailout talks. He came under fire last night announcing the rescue.
The reality is, and everybody bar you seems to know this, you're a liability, not just to your party, not just to your government, but to the country, because nobody believes you. And also people know you're the guy most responsible for the chaos that has been caused. Don't you owe it, as an act of patriotism to the Irish people, to get out now?
Sorry, Vincent, I don't accept the premise of what you're saying.
The Irish leader has been meeting his ministers today. In order for the IMF and EU rescue to pass, he'll have to muster the votes for controversial budget policies, including a 10% cut to welfare, a €1 cut in the minimum wage, tens of thousands of public sector job cuts, perhaps a VAT rise. Difficult enough, even without a general election in 8 weeks.
Oh, it is it's a terrible mess, but at least an election and the 4-year plan and the arrival of the IMF does give a bit of certainty down the line that the mess is going to be dealt with in the short term rather than the long term.
But this isn't just about Ireland. Stock markets across Europe were down today as fears spread beyond the Emerald Isle. So here it is, the cause of all the trouble, perhaps the euro. And when this was created just over a decade ago, there was one concession offered to the member countries, including Ireland. So all the tails are the same, but if you turn it around, the heads are different. That's Italy's, and here's Spain's, and this is the Germans, and this, the famous harp of Ireland. And for so long, many people just assumed that the euro was this, a reincarnation of the Deutschmark. This year we realised it also had elements of punt, peseta and lira, and that it was backed by some countries with very high deficits and debts. And the question now that the Irish have been saved is that will this crisis really just stop and not spread to Portugal, Italy or even Spain? With today's news on politics, it seems highly unlikely. In the birthplace of the Irish Republic, a new monument, not to Ireland's independence, but seemingly the size of its financial mismanagement. And it's everybody's problem. Faisal Islam, Channel 4 News, Dublin.
Well, let's stay in Dublin now. We're joined by the chairman of the Green Party, Dan Boyle. He's a member of the Irish Senate and his party's spokesman for finance. Senator Boyle, you've put a pistol to the government's head tonight, and presumably that's what's provoked this emergency cabinet meeting and a statement from the Taoiseach.
Well, I'm not too sure about the holding of a cabinet meeting. I know the Taoiseach is meant to make a statement, but our action has been predicated on bringing certainty, both in terms of the Irish economy and the political needs of the Irish people to have a say in the future government of this country. We've committed ourselves towards taking particular actions, very difficult and likely to be very unpopular actions in terms of a budget for 2011, a 4-year economic plan, and there's legislation that needs to underpin that, all the while important negotiations are happening with the IMF and the European Commission and European Central Bank. On that basis, we believe that this work can be done by early January, and then we need to explore the area of further consultation with the Irish people and the business of selecting a new government.
But is the Taoiseach Brian Cowan even the right man to be holding the ring for these very, very delicate 3 or 4 weeks to come?
Well, this is issues about the state of the Irish economy and Irish politics in general, and it's not issues of personality that we're involved in. We're a policy-led party ourselves, and we've faced a baptism of fire as a first-time party in government during the most difficult circumstances. It could be argued the most difficult circumstances of any Irish government since the foundation of the state. But despite that, we are willing to remain in government to make the continuing hard decisions that have to be made to secure our economic future.
But in your mind, there has to be an election in January, and if there isn't, you'll bring the government down.
Well, we will no longer consider ourselves part of the government and wouldn't be prepared to support the government once the necessary decisions have to be made in relation to the economy. And we're looking for not only the cooperation of our partners in government in that, but also the cooperation of other opposition parties, as was the case in Portugal recently when they had to pass their budget.
You've talked of very tough decisions and very tough times to come and cuts. Do you include in that the possibility that, for example, corporation tax, which is so advantageous to companies setting up in Dublin, will have to be raised?
Well, one of the difficulties we have at the moment with the negotiations that are going on and the view of some countries towards our corporation tax is that we need an economic incentive. We need a fillip to achieve rates of growth that would not allow our public finances to deteriorate any further. So it's a bit of a circular argument to say that we should be looking at something that is one of the things that encourages our economy to prosper. We would be more concerned about achieving particular levels of growth, 2.5–3.5% over the next 4 years, that would help us grow out of this situation ourselves. We do have a positive balance of payments here. We do have export-led growth, and those are the areas we want to protect that will allow us not to draw down facilities of the magnitude we've been talking about in recent weeks.
A last quick one. I mean, what do you imagine the Taoiseach needs to come out to say?
Well, the Taoiseach has a prerogative under the Irish Constitution as to when a general election can be called. We have made an argument that we're facing a very important set of decisions. We've committed ourselves as a party in government to have those decisions made, and our hope would be that he's accepting of our argument. But at the end of the day, as an individual, as someone who holds that office, he has the right to make the decision as regards to how he thinks a general election should be held and when.
Senator Boyle, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, more from Ireland shortly.